Hey friends, it's Daisy! In our last story of Purple Pot Pete's big hot adventure, Pete settled into his new apartment in Santa Monica, California, and landed a job as a junior engineer. Life is booming for Pete. A few years later, though, he misses his family. This is the story of Pete's family reunion. Be sure to subscribe to hear about all of our character stories. So guys, are you ready to have some fun? Let's go. On a cool, crisp Saturday morning in mid-December, Pete's phone rang. He knew it was his brother, Fred Fudgecake, calling, since his number had a special ringtone. His big, warm heart leaped into his throat as he jumped out of his ice bed inside the freezer. Sure enough, it was Fred calling from the South Pole, which is located on the continent of Antarctica.
How are you, Pete?
Asked Fred.
Hi, Fred. I'm awesome. How are you? Life is a bowl of popsicles. What's going on?
We really miss you, Pete,
cried Fred.
Hey, I have a hoppin' idea. I can come visit the family for a few days,
suggested Pete.
Holy puddin' pops, that would be awesome, Pete. When can you come?
Asked Fred.
Well, I think I could be there in 2 days,
exclaimed Pete. With that, the two sugary delights hung up in pure excitement. Without wasting a second, Pete signed onto his computer, where he booked the next flight to the South Pole. Naturally, he bought a cargo ticket, which is where baggage is stowed on the plane. The cargo area is icy cold, so it was perfect since Pete wouldn't have to worry about melting. Then he dashed into his room and stuffed 3 of his favorite cold suits and a toothbrush into a small suitcase. Of course, he would not need to wear a cold suit once he arrived at the South Pole, since it was freezing cold there. Still, he packed his new scarf and clunky snow boots. After a long flight, Pete's plane finally arrived at the South Pole's Willie Field Airport, where it landed on a slick, icy runway. Pete was wearing his scarf and snow boots, and boy was he a proud pop. As he skipped down the air stairs, he met with a blast of bone-chilling wind and leaped with delight.
Holy flippin' freezer pops! As always, the weather is perfect,
Pete claimed as the rest of his fellow passengers shivered in their massive furry coats and fluffy hats. Suddenly, he spotted them. Off in the distance waited the entire Cold family, with brother Fred Fudgecake leading the pop parade. Pete gasped in excitement as his big heart swelled in anticipation. Back home, such extreme emotion would have surely caused a major meltdown. It was a homecoming of epic proportion. As Pete was greeted by his mother and father, Victoria Vanilla and Randy Rainbow, he ran into their arms as tears of joy streamed down all faces, freezing firmly on their cheeks. There were his sugar-sweet little sister and brother,
Aww.
Ruby Rainbow and Perry Peanut Butter. My, had they grown. And his twin sisters, Sienna Strawberry and Gabby Blueberry, who had blossomed into dainty, sweet stuffs of perfection. With their glowing swirls of color, they were prettier than ever. But Pete had always been closest to his big brother Fred, so this greeting was saved for last. The entire Cold family opened as the 2 frozen treats ran into each other's arms in pure glory, which sealed the reunion. Obviously, big warm hearts ran in the Cold family. With so much love, surely the entire clan would have melted anywhere beyond Antarctica. Once home, the family of Cold Confections laughed and recalled memories while Mrs. Victoria Vanilla put the finishing touches on Pete's favorite meal, a lavish spread of frozen fruit with a medley of chopped nuts and a round of cucumber coconut slushies for all. Just as Pete was about to burst, Mama Victoria served up a sparkling dessert of star fruit chewies, complemented by mango mint smoothies. It was good to be home. That evening, the entire Cold family gathered in the living room around a hearth of candle-lit snowballs that gave the igloo a magical glow. They shared stories, remembered family adventures, and what it was like growing up at the South Pole as their bellies bulged from Mama Victoria's feast. It was such a lovely evening, and all their big, warm hearts swelled with love. But the chilly room grew quiet as Papa Randy Rainbow addressed Pete with the biggest family curiosity.
Son, how is it that you're able to survive in that warm California weather when generations of our family have only lived here at the South Pole?
Asked Papa Randy Rainbow. Oh, they all knew about the cold suit that Pete had invented as a teenager while still living with his family there at the South Pole. And they heard his claims over the years of how the cold suit was the only way he could survive in any other climate. But being that Pete was also the family rebel, they questioned these stories. And yet, there he sat, right in front of them, a solid, well-formed pop, showing no signs of meltdowns. Therefore, there must be some truth to the cold suit stories. For Pete, engineering the cold suit was about pure common sense. Sure, he had perfected it over the years. Then, he explained how his cold suit had evolved in such simple terms that the family sat wide-eyed and impressed. Wow. They were proud of Pete and his clever talent. The next morning, the entire family set out for a jolly day of tobogganing with their good friends, the Waddle family. The Waddles were a sizable colony of penguins that the Colds had known for years. The two families became fast friends when Pete was just a young pup. Of all the Waddle children and cousins, Pete was closest with China, Mac, and Rock. They were sturdy boys and loved to cause trouble. Oh, the mischief they got into. So it was no surprise that the Waddle boys should take great pleasure in tobogganing with the Cold family. Pete and his relatives laughed and shared jokes as they piled into the sled. Meanwhile, China, Mac, and Rock, the sled penguins, teamed up to harness and pull the group. It was quite a sight to watch penguins sledding with frozen pops. Wow. Meanwhile, back at the igloo, Mama Victoria lovingly prepared another one of Pete's favorite meals. It was a special treat made with her son in mind. A homemade pineapple yogurt popping with passion fruit, topped with Mama's famous easy cherry sauce. Can you say yummy? Too delicious for words to describe. She really was an incredible cook. Whenever the Colds and the Waddles got together, adventure was guaranteed. China, Mac, and Rock charged through the snow at such a rapid speed that even Pete got a little nervous. The combination of laughter and high energy took him back to his childhood as memories flooded his big, warm heart. Had Pete been back home in Santa Monica, the emotion surely would have triggered a meltdown. As the afternoon came to an end, Pete grew sad, since the next morning he had to fly home. There were big hugs between Pete and the penguins as, teary-eyed, they said goodbye, not knowing when the friends would see each other next. That evening, after the Colds indulged in Mama Victoria's fruity feast, Pete laid in his ice bed, replaying the day's activities. His belly swelled with tasty treats from the big dinner as his eyes grew heavy with fatigue. Finally, he drifted off to a sleepy world of dazzling dreams. The next morning, he awoke to the sound of Papa Randy's deep voice calling him to breakfast. There, he joked with his twin sisters, Sienna and Gabby. Then it was time to go. His two brothers, Fred and Perry, would go with him on the short walk to the airport. Mama Victoria's big, luxurious eyes filled with tears as she grabbed her son and held him close to her heart. How could Pete hold back? The mother and son gushed tear-filled goodbyes as the rest of the Cold clan gathered round with promises that soon they would all be together again. The end. Hey friends, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Pete's Family Reunion, go to daisyfrench.com where you can find out more about Pete and a lot of other characters. You can also read our blog that has fun animations. Now, Pete has just returned home to Santa Monica, California. He has just learned about a terrible illness called the coronavirus. What can Pete do to stop this yucky virus? Find out how Pete uses his cold suit to save the world in Pete Defeats Coronavirus. So go ahead and subscribe to get notifications of our next stories along with the many escapades of Purple Pup Pete, Sarah Sadness, Popcorn Penny, and more characters on the way. And don't forget to tell your friends. See you again soon.